Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, so let's look at your paper here. And so you can, in case we make some more changes to it, I'll send it to you again here. So, so it was really well-written paper. I was impressed by it. So what did you just remind myself here? You say that one of the major events that brought down the U.S. economy and its stance in international policy was the Vietnam War. It's hard to say, I guess if I were going to make further comments, it's hard to say that the United States stance in the world declined as a consequence of the Vietnam War. I mean, I guess it's significant insofar as it depends on your point of view. Like if you're, for example, a realist, this is not the US foreign policy class, so I talk about realism, liberalism, constructivism in that class, but realists tend to assume that states act as if the optimization of their influence in the world, power and influence in the world, is their foreign policy drive or motivation. So the United States did get involved in the Vietnam War. And as it became clear that the United States had made a mistake, at least not to the Americans, maybe perhaps, but to much of the rest of the world, the United States made a mistake in getting involved in that war and was unable to get out because of American nationalism, which was continuing to be a problem in terms of America rectifying its mistake. Keep in mind, thousands of people are dying every year as a result of this war, and the Europeans, for example, and other actors began to criticize the United States, including American allies, began criticizing the United States. Now you can say that means a decline in the stance of the United States in the world, because it's being criticized for its behavior in the Vietnam War. But what kind of ultimate significance did that have? I mean, somebody who's your typical American analyst today might say, well, in the end, the Americans still won the Cold War. So it didn't. It was a setback, but of course, the United States still was able to prevail over the Soviet Union in the competition for world influence, and the Soviet Union just disintegrated. And others might argue that, again, this is not the US foreign policy class, this is the US history class. If the Americans are so dominant in the world, why are so many of the American people willing to support somebody like Donald Trump, who's criticizing all of these institutions and influence of the United States in the world as part of his political campaign to win office in 2016. Now, keep in mind, there are a lot of different reasons why he won the election and defeated Hillary Clinton. And that's something I keep reminding myself, right? That there's not one, there's a number of factors. And he did receive 3 million fewer votes than Hillary Clinton received. But he was able to use the rules as they were set up in the electoral college system in the United States in terms of how they elected president, and he was able to do what he needed to do to win the election. But as part of that, of his campaign, there was this criticism of the Europeans, not to mention China. There was the criticism of global environmental greenhouse gas emission reductions. All of these, not all, but so much of these institutions and of the world and coordinated frameworks for cooperation that the United States had played a critical role in establishing after World War II. Why would Americans, so many Americans, not all, but so many Americans, respond positively to Donald Trump's criticism of those institutions that sort of made the world in so much under the US influence, or reflects America's influence, including this class. I mean, the fact that I'm talking to you in English at an American style university. Why would Americans, so many Americans, have some kind of a problem with that? And that's the question, right? And that has to do with what are the what I hate using this term. What is the reality of what's going on, which includes the consequences of globalization and the globalization of the American society and American economy and American society more broadly, and the reaction of many Americans to that globalization that was itself an aspect of international relations that's highly shaped by American influence. So, as a result of America's influence in the world, English, for example, is the dominant foreign language, international language of business. And that's because of American influence. So, but if you're going to engage in that kind of exploitation of the opportunities of globalization that the United States provided, you need to be trained, right? You need to be able to have a certification as being able to carry out certain capabilities that organizations, multinational corporations need. Not just multinational corporations, any corporations, whether it be training in business administration or accounting or in teaching or or in English language instruction. I mean, you can't just get a high school diploma and go teach English in Korea. You have to have some kind of, you have to have a TESOL, or teaching English as a second language certificate, right? And that means you have to be able to get through college, right? And so it seems like a lot of the response to globalization is increasing polarization among those sections of American society that are exploiting the Americanization, the Americanization of globalization, including me, right? I mean, I got a job here at Catholic University of Korea, right? And those elements of society that view themselves as becoming less and less relevant to shaping and determining American policies and American development. And not all, but a disproportionate amount of those people are white people without college degrees, and particularly white men without college degrees. And this is one of the main sources of Donald Trump's core support, right? That as America becomes more diversified, because of course, if you grow up studying English in South Korea and you're really ambitious and you want a global career, you learned English because you had to start studying English when you were 7 years old in South Korea. You might want to get a job in the United States, particularly if you have a family member there who went there, during the Korean War or afterwards. And so America becomes more and more diverse, with more and more of these people typically coming to America because they have high training, and they're getting these jobs and becoming more and more influential in the United States. And if you're that section of society that is not that remembers or believes that there was a time when you could live the same way as your parents, and if your parents are not college educated and you're not college educated, that was okay. You could still live a middle-class life. But it's not so easy for families to make that transition. Like, I was the first among my big extended family. I was among the first people to go to college. And I've had my sisters graduated from college, but it's been very difficult to get other children of my family, of my uncles and aunts and their children's children to go to college. Why? Because it seems, I don't think it's because they're cognitively stupid. It's just because there's not this culture that you have to pursue this. You have to do this. It's just not so these people. I mean, I come from family that I know they voted for Trump. I don't want to talk about it because I can't get into a conflict with them because they're too important for me in a lot of ways. But I know that they're, in my state of Ohio, it voted for Trump by 8 percentage points in 2016 and again in 2020. Despite all the bad things he did, they still voted for Trump, 8% more for Trump than for Clinton. How can that be? And there's this reaction, this hostility among people that see the American global government, the American government being in their view, being too responsive to the needs to accommodate diversification. Because, and they're blaming this diversification on some kind of global orientation that the elite have, that the American elite, represented by Barack Hussein Obama and Hillary Clinton, that they are more concerned about America's influence in the world at the expense of the interests of American working class people, at their expense for the well-being of workers in Brazil or Mexico or Korea or elsewhere, and somebody like Trump exploited that in order to appeal to build a coalition of voters to succeed in winning the 2016 elections. But but you might, I mean, it's still, you might say, okay, that sounds really rational. Sounds really logical. What, but still, so many, so much of American influence in the world has been so great. Are the Americans going to really reject all of that? And I think that they don't reject, these Americans don't really reject all of that. What they reject is this belief that you have to compromise with other countries, even your allies, in order to protect America's interests. And that this focus on allies implies that there are threats. If you're going to have allies, you have to have threats. And what are those threats? And those threats are typically
Communism?
Huh? What are the threats? Sorry.
I'm sorry. I said communism.
Well, during this, yeah, I mean, during the Cold War, it was that. And but these people, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because when I think I showed this, I think I showed this in class, right? This is a news clip from almost 11 months ago, when Donald Trump, the fascist, because he's a fascist basically, was trying to carry out a coup in the United States to keep power. His supporters organized an assault on the Capitol, and you saw, this is an image that was reported from those insurrectionists attacking the U.S. Congress to try to force the Congress to give the presidency to the United States, the presidency to Donald Trump, even though Donald Trump lost the election. So let me, make sure I'm sharing that screen with you. And I think I showed this in class, before. So here you see, this is the January 6th protesters. Why are the South Vietnam flag was flown at the Capitol riot? And so here you see one of these protesters attacking the Congress and trying to threaten the congressman that he's flying the South Vietnam flag, right? Did I talk about this in class?
Mm-hmm.
I did? Do you remember if I talked about this in class? You don't remember?
I actually don't.
Okay, so here you see they're flying the South Vietnam flag. And then you see here also behind them, you see another flag. This is a flag flying at the US Congress. This is put up by the US Congress. You see this American flag, right? But then you see this flag. And this flag you see everywhere in America. You see it in fire stations, police stations, in my hometown in Ohio, everywhere. And what is that flag? And I want to illustrate this because this flag highlights this suspicion of these anti-globalists going back to the Vietnam War. And as you mentioned, the U.S. lost the Vietnam War. This is the flag, right? I think you can see it. I got to make sure you can see it if I screen share again. You saw this flag. That's not this image. And this flag is reflecting this movement that began. It says, prisoner of war, missing in action, you are not forgotten. This, and you see a prisoner, it looks like a man in a prison camp. That the claim was that their suspicion was that there were still American soldiers who were prisoners of war in Vietnam that the U.S. government had abandoned. So you can see it was adopted in 1972. That there are still some number of living American Vietnam veterans, Vietnam War, who are being held hostage. I mean, there's some number of American soldiers that are missing in action. We don't know. I mean, I don't know what the number is now, hundreds, or I don't know, maybe more of people, of soldiers who we don't know what happened to them. They're almost certainly dead, but it's not proven. But you see this flag floating, which implies that there's still these people hiding, and that they're being hit. And the point is this: that the authorities of the U.S. government are lying to us. That the establishment authorities, like represented by people like Hillary Clinton and Hussein Obama and Joe Biden, that these people are lying to us. They lied to us about the Vietnam War. That's why we lost the Vietnam War. Something was going on about the Vietnam War. How do we get in a war and then not win? Who did that? Who's responsible for that? And that continues. Now the war has been over since 1973. That there's still that the government, the authorities are still lying to the American people about what happened, what's going on in Vietnam. And that suspicion, that fear, that of conspiracy is characterizing these intense American nationalists who are questioning these establishment authorities, whom people like Steve Bannon claim they're all part of the globalist set. They're all part of some kind of global conspiracy to integrate the world and create an America that's somehow committed to global integration at the expense of the people, hardworking American people, so we can serve the interests of somebody else somewhere in other countries, and that in order to create a world that is a one world, one people, one world. That America will dissolve and China, and will all integrate and become a world government. And of course, a lot of these people are religious people, and they will point to the Bible and say, yes, according to my muksa, my minister, before the coming of Jesus, there will be an effort to try to create a one world government, and that's the United Nations, and then Israel has to be supported, because Israel's creation is required according to this Bible as interpreted by a muksa right before, on the eve of the second coming of Jesus and the end times. And this sounds wild and crazy, but that's the nature of nationalism. And this really became more and more intense as a feature of the American political system with the humiliation of the Vietnam War. That, as the United States got involved in Vietnam, it thought that it had to contain the Soviet Union wherever supposedly the Soviet Union was causing trouble, to try to expand the communist empire. And that the Americans became involved in the Vietnam War, but then when they realized, or started to realize, that the resistance that they were facing was too intense, and it wasn't because of trouble caused by Beijing and Moscow, that they were fighting a national self-determination movement. They rejected that because they didn't want to admit that they made this mistake, and they didn't want to lose a war. You can't lose a war. You can't ask thousands of your boys to die in combat, fulfilling their military service obligation because we had a draft, and then lose. So regardless of what we got in that war, we have to win. And so why did we not win, or why did we get involved in that? And so these people look for conspiratorial explanations for that outcome, and they look to the claim that basically the United States problems, including the loss of the Vietnam War, and finally leading to the victory of the United States in the Cold War. Like, thankfully, not due to Hillary Clinton, not due to not due to Howard Zinn, not due to, in spite of Noam Chomsky, in spite of these social movement protesters, these feminists and gay rights activists, in spite of all of their degeneracy, making America weak, still the conservative Republican nationalists were able to compensate for the horrible mistakes and failures and weakness of Lyndon Johnson and Jimmy Carter to save America from communism and defeat the Soviet Union. And that these same forces are now supposedly pushing to make America return to those traditional American values that supposedly made America great, and are not represented by the new left social movements that are seen as a source of weakness, and that are somehow driving America towards a more globalist orientation, right? That we have to be concerned about the world environment, and we have to be concerned about the suffering of poor people in Africa because of global climate change. So we Americans, we have to change our lifestyles. Why? Because we're so concerned about how African farmers are going to deal with reduced rainfall in Africa. And they get furious with this, and that this is all part of these this globalist orientation that supposedly we have to work for global LGBTQ rights and global abortion rights and access for women to abortion, and that this is all part of a global plan to create a global human rights based international global government that will that undermines traditional American values as represented by this, as interpreted by Amoksa. And these people become very emotional because they look around at the American society since the 1970s. I mean, they point out that, America, they've always had lots of guns. You can say, well, increasing income differentiation between the rich and the poor is causing more crime. No, it's not. There's always been tremendous wealth difference between the richest and poorest in America. We've always had guns in America. So why now we have all these problems with drugs, with crime, with shootings, with murder? Why do we have these problems? You know why we have these problems? Because we don't agree anymore on what is right and wrong. We don't have a consensus on what it means to behave correctly versus behaving incorrectly. In the past, we all had a consensus on this. Abortion is murder. Sex before marriage is bad, at least for the woman. For the man, we kind of forgive that because men are supposed to be men. Right? But now, since the 1960s and 70s, you're supposed to do whatever you feel like doing. If it feels good, do it. If you want to have a baby without being married, that's okay. Because thanks to Lyndon Johnson and the Great Society programs, if you have a baby and you're not married, the government will give you money. And to pay for that money, the government will tax the rich people and therefore weaken the American economy because we have big taxes to pay for irresponsible, lazy people who can't take care of themselves, who don't want to take care of themselves because they're taught they don't have to take care of themselves because of the Democrats and the social welfare policies and abortion legalization that began in the 1960s and 70s social movements. So that's their explanation for what we, as analysts, say. This is a reaction against globalization. It's not just in America. You see it in lots of places. You see it in Britain. You see it in other countries. You see it now in France. Difference because they have different social welfare traditions. But all of these countries are responding to globalization because it means diversification of society. More and more minorities, more and more people that don't look like me, who don't talk like me, who don't worship like me. Who go to mosque, who go to Hindu temple, including, in not just in big cities, in small areas. I mean, there's this big Hindu temple in West Virginia you can drive by that I think the Hare Krishnas built, in West Virginia. And Donald Trump played with those sentiments. And we have to conclude here because I have to go do an online class in a minute. But and if you want to talk more later, we can, because we started a little bit late. But when Donald Trump is not only the people that support Donald Trump not only support him, they love him. They love that guy. Why? Because he talks like them, he speaks like them, he acts like them, he looks like them with his blondie, and he won. He showed that those people are still relevant, that they're not only relevant, that they can win and take control of society. And he made them feel validated in the midst of all this globalization. So he's not only supported, he is loved, that guy. And he has made the Republican, completed the transition of the Republican Party, becoming the party of white nationalism in the United States. And of course, people don't admit that. They don't come out, because you're not supposed to be racist, right? But that's basically what has happened in terms of what the Republican Party has moved towards since the election of Donald Trump. So, do you have any questions?
Can you tell me once more about global orientation?
Global orientation means orienting towards alliances with other states to come up with common coordinated international approaches to economic and social and environmental challenges. And that means compromising with others.
So it's moving away from isolation and trying to be trying to be more active in global issues like
Right.
Global climate change and that kind of
Right.
stuff, right?
Yeah.
And that's what white
making
nationalists do not
Yeah.
like.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I have to teach the U.S. foreign policy class now, so we'll have to stop and then and we can pick it up later. Okay.
Yeah, if I have a question, I'll send you an email.
Okay. Bye.